my interest is making a good movie that honors the existence of dinosaurs, even juxtaposed with man today, which is a little bit out of kilter with actuality. But if the movie is honorable and can, get people to say, gee, this is the first time I've really seen a dinosaur. This isn't Gorgo, this isn't Godzilla. This is really a movie that I think is really happening as I'm watching it.
Action!
With Jurassic Park, Steven Spielberg recalled from extinction the greatest creatures our planet has ever known. Reborn before our eyes were living, breathing dinosaurs. Now, we'll discover the secrets of their recreation. To resurrect these ancient and powerful creatures, director Spielberg and his team of special effects wizards embarked on a 3-year journey of discovery, creating new technologies, transforming old ones, and ushering filmmaking into the 21st century. I'm James Earl Jones. Join me as we make that same journey of discovery and share in the excitement of a motion picture 65 million years in the making. From the earliest days of cinema, movie dinosaurs have thrilled and terrified audiences with their ferocity, if not always their believability. But since The Lost World dazzled viewers in 1925, moviegoers have become increasingly sophisticated, expecting ever greater levels of realism, expecting reality. Jurassic Park set out to give us that reality, to let us meet face to face the awesome creatures whose legacy fills our grand halls of exhibition. For 165 million years, dinosaurs ruled our world, the most dominant species of all time. Even their naked bones dwarf us. Standing amongst them, our imagination is fired, and in awe we wonder how they were as living creatures. The sheer power of their limbs, the rough texture of their skin, the grace of their gait, how they sounded, how they hunted, even how they ate. This is the task that the makers of Jurassic Park set themselves, to bring these grand creatures back to life with absolute credibility. Steven Spielberg wished to show us not movie monsters, but the animals themselves as they might have been. Immense and beautiful living beings that were once lords of the earth. Through an extraordinary combination of paleontology, artistry, and breakthrough technology, he did just that. The story of Jurassic Park begins long ago, when the prehistoric reign of the dinosaurs came to a mysterious end. For 65 million years, their secrets lay buried in the earth. Then, in the late 19th century, man's discovery of ancient fossils suddenly unveiled an undreamed of prehistoric past. These towering skeletons captured the entire world's imagination. We all long to see dinosaurs live again.
My first toy from a museum that I ever got was a little lead-cast Triceratops. And I became fascinated as a kid, as all kids do, because I think they're bigger than us. And they were something that doesn't exist today. And I think because it doesn't exist today, there's no immediate direct access, it becomes the thing that mythology is made of, that makes mythology so fascinating. Well, only it's real. It's not mythology. And I think even though it has the pull and the seduction of mythology, it also has its roots in reality.
That reality inspired Michael Crichton's fact-based concept for Jurassic Park, where genetic science allows our past to become our future.
The notion that extinct animals can be recreated genetically is something that's been discussed for at least 10 years in scientific literature. And when I first started, I was talking to friends at MIT and saying, I have this idea about engineering dinosaurs, and saying it very tentatively, and some of them said, it'll probably work, and which was kind of encouraging to me.
Michael Crichton and I were actually working on another project together, a screenplay, and I asked him, so what are you doing in the world of books? He said, I'm writing this thing about dinosaurs and DNA, and my eyes got wide, and suddenly I wanted to hear more, and I coaxed it out of him until he told me basically the whole story. So that's how the whole thing began. And even before I had a screenplay, I began to storyboard the novel. I'd never done that before. I broke the novel down into scenes that I thought I might want to carry over into the motion picture version.
As Spielberg conceived his ambitious plans for the movie and its dinosaurs, it became clear that bringing his vision to life would require an unparalleled level of special effects.
My one precedent for Jurassic Park was King Kong. King Kong was the high watermark of special effects, creating a world that I never knew existed, especially the great fight between King Kong and the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Almost like a sumo wrestling match. It's a little bit funny today because I can see the professional wrestling parallels. But as a young person, that scene had no peer. And I think that was my high water mark for imagining what it would be like to do a King Kong of today. And certainly I don't consider Jurassic Park a classic as King Kong is a classic, but I was so inspired by King Kong, that was one of the reasons I think I wanted to make Jurassic Park.
What do they got in there, King Kong?
Ironically, it was a modern-day Kong that inspired Spielberg's initial plan for Jurassic's dinosaurs.
I was very impressed with Bob Gurr and his creation at Universal Studios with King Kong, which basically is like a big inflatable balloon that moves with wonderful smoothness. You can actually see muscle tone moving underneath the fur. And I was very impressed with that. And so Bob Gurr and I had some initial conversations about making some of the dinosaurs full size. Matter of fact, I initially wanted to make all the dinosaurs full size, and that, of course, was just my wishful thinking. But that didn't work out. We were going to break some new ground, but it was going to be costly new ground. The next idea I had was to go to the great physical effects maestros in town.
Spielberg assembled Hollywood's top special effects talent for a unique collaboration. Stan Winston, Phil Tippett, Dennis Muren, and Michael Lantieri would compose Jurassic's design team.
I remember a conversation simply on the line of, would we be interested? And it was like, be interested, my goodness.
The initial approach for Jurassic's dinosaurs relied on traditional technology, combining movable miniatures created by Phil Tippett with a few full-size robotic creatures designed by Stan Winston. Michael Lantieri would supervise the interaction of these elements with the actors in the set. And Dennis Muren would lead the team at Industrial Light and Magic in combining the elements on film in post-production. By 1991, work was underway at Stan Winston's studio. The first step was to determine the look of each character.
The artistry of getting these dinosaurs to look real is absolutely the most important first step. If they didn't look real, if you didn't believe their skin, their flesh, their reality, their details, their eyes, their teeth, their mouth, everything about them, no matter how good the performances were, it wouldn't be real. Because you'd have something acting real, but it didn't look real.
It's so real. I think my kids are going to love to come to the set and see this guy, and then they're going to want to go home.
The reactions from Steven Spielberg, from Michael Crichton, from anyone who would walk in and see the process was always excitement. You get jazzed, you get high, you go, whoa, it's really coming alive. As the sculpture is finished, the molds are taken from that, and from those molds the skins are made. Those then go on to the robotics and animatronics that have been built in a parallel process. So you have the robotics, which are your skeletal structure and muscles, and then your skins, which are pulled from the molds that go over those animatronic and robotics of these dinosaurs. So that's why this is such a perfect combination of art and technology.
It soon became important to decide how the dinosaurs would be required to move on screen.
Phil Tippett wanted to actually do storyboards three-dimensionally with little clay figures of dinosaurs and people that would completely imitate my storyboards, but flesh out my storyboards and give them dimension.
These temporary sequences were known as animatics.
Storyboards don't show you any of the temporal cadence, the sequence, the timing of it, and the animatics allowed us to block out the entire sequence so that Stephen on the set would have this template that he could use to show the actors this is the way it's going to look. Stephen's direction from the very first day was that he knew that there were things with big pointy teeth chasing people and trying to eat them. That he had a monster movie on his hands. I mean that was a given. But he didn't want to have these things portrayed as monsters. He wanted to bring them back down to a naturalistic level, and he wanted them portrayed as animals. So we spent a great deal of time working with the paleontologists and doing a lot of field work.
To help portray scientifically accurate behavior, filmmakers enlisted the help of paleontologist Jack Horner, one of the world's leading dinosaur experts. Horner's research has been instrumental in changing our view of dinosaurs. He contends that birds, not reptiles, represent their closest living link. For Jurassic's design team, maintaining scientific accuracy would mean breaking the reptilian stereotypes associated with dinosaurs.
The whole idea is to get people to look at dinosaurs more like birds than as reptiles. And one of the scenes, some of the model makers had made a tongue come out, like a lizard or a snake.
I came up with this routine for the raptors where they were genetic mutations to a degree, so I thought we'll have the raptor stick out his tongue, and Horner saw the animatics of that and just came down on us like a ton of bricks and said, whose stupid idea was that? Mine, sir. And he said, no, they could never do that.
We know that they didn't do that. So had that been left in the scene, all the work into making these things bird-like would have been gone.
Once the characteristics of Jurassic's dinosaurs had been settled, it was time to put them to the test and see how they looked in motion. At this stage, the plan called for all wide shots to be done with Phil Tippett's go-motion technique, a modern extension of traditional stop-motion animation. The full potential and limitations of stop-motion was realized by Ray Harryhausen in 1963's Jason and the Argonauts.
Skeleton fight was just phenomenal, and yet there was no blurring in that. Every frame was in focus, so when a sword came down, they didn't build in a motion blur. But Phil Tippett had perfected the motion blur, which gave Go Motion a closer resemblance to real life. But it wasn't 100%. It was still jerky. And Phil did a whole bunch of wonderful blur motions on a T-Rex running, on a raptor running. I come home with my kids and look at this stuff over and over and over again. And my kids bought it. They said, wow, Dad, a real dinosaur. But I still saw the jerk. The movement was very accurate and very rhythmical, but there was still something a bit go-motion-y about it. And that's when Dennis Muren came to me with this idea to show me a test.
But it seemed like if you did that work as good as you could possibly do, it wouldn't be up to the quality of I think, what the audiences today expect and deserve, and what we're capable of giving them. So we sort of began a little experimenting to see how far the computer technology had taken us during Terminator, if we could go up to another level.
At this point in time, Dennis Muren and ILM were working on Terminator 2 with director James Cameron, pushing the boundaries of computer-generated images, referred to as CGI.
I had no idea that this amazing new process, CGI, was alive, except I did ask Dennis Muren 1,000 questions about the water tendril from Jim Cameron's other film, Abyss, which I was very impressed with. It was all done inside the computer. Predating that, I produced a movie that Barry Levinson directed called Young Sherlock Holmes, where the very first computer creature was ever put in a movie, and that was also ILM. So there's been an interesting passing of the torch between what we did with Young Sherlock Holmes, what Cameron then took great leaps and bounds with a quantum leap to Abyss and then Terminator, and then eventually to the suggestion that Dennis Muren made to me, where he said, would you ever consider letting us do most of the full-size dinosaurs from head to toe on the computer? And my first reaction was, well, prove it. And he went out and he proved it.
There's a number of things that we had to solve at the start of the show if we were going to risk what we were going to risk, because it was pretty difficult. We didn't know if we could do it, if it was going to be a disaster or whatever.
There was a lot of debate because we never made living creatures. We've done a lot of sort of stylized things like creatures of the water or made out of this liquid metal like in Terminator 2. But the big question is, could we make something come to life? Could it breathe and sweat and be believable as a living creature?
You can make an object look like it's chrome or make it look like plastic. I looked at all the footage of computer graphics work that had been done with dinosaurs and with animals of any type, and there wasn't anything that even came close to looking real. So we started some investigating to see if we could do it.
And initially, all we did was build things out of bones, just to give them an example of how it could move and the dynamism.
The first test was he was going to create a herd of rampaging gallimimus. It was going to look like a Museum of Natural History run amok, with all these skeletons jumping off their steel supports and running through a field, which is all the first test was. But I'll never forget the time that Dennis brought the first test down. I've never seen movements this smooth outside of looking at National Geographic documentaries.
Despite the relative crudeness of the earlier tests, it was clear that Phil Tippett's go-motion dinosaurs could be replaced by this breakthrough computer technology.
Dennis had kept me informed about all the tests that he was doing. I was thinking, holy this is it. We're going to be in big trouble now.
But I didn't dare call Phil up at that time and say, hey, Phil, we'd like to, replace what you were going to do on the film. Creating 100 shots with the best go motion ever done in history with CGI. I didn't have the heart to do that then because I wasn't completely convinced until I saw a fleshed dinosaur outside in the worst harsh sunlight.
We had our T-Rex walking in the field, just kind of searching. We had the gallimimuses running, and then we put the two together. Then everyone saw the potential. Now you can see a real physical animal, his skin moving, him breathing, his muscles bulging, all that kind of stuff.
When I saw that, and Phil saw that with me for the first time, and there we were watching our future unfolding on the TV screen, so authentic I couldn't believe my eyes, and it blew my mind again. And I turned to Phil, and Phil looked at me, and Phil said, I think I'm extinct. And I actually used Phil's line in the movie, gave it to Malcolm to say to Grant when they were walking up the stairs.
We're out of a job. Don't you mean extinct?
That's what Phil said to me, so I kind of rubbed it in by using it in the film itself.
The change was devastating. I had different concessions, building equipment, building puppets, building all this stuff, and all of a sudden it, was, boink, the plug was pulled.
Phil, I think, felt very bad that I wanted to go 100% CGI and no-go motion at all, which we have no-go motion in Jurassic Park. But I think Phil was able to turn himself into the director of the CGI dinosaurs.
Eventually, Phil realized there was a place for him, and I was convinced him there is a place for you in your shop on the show. He had some really terrific animators there that understood how we could make these dinosaurs move naturally.
He knew so much about dinosaurs and the behavior of animals that he became an animal trainer. He became basically a paleontologist, and he became the Alan Grant of ILM.
As the start of filming approached, the final strategy was determined. Phil Tippett's animators would join forces with ILM's computer artists and Stan Winston's robotics team. Together, they would bring Spielberg's vision of living, breathing dinosaurs to the screen. August 1992. The Jurassic Park cast and crew traveled to the Hawaiian island of Kauai to begin 3 weeks of location shooting.
Can Laura jump in?
Yes. Ms. Dern, please.
Kauai was an ideal setting for Jurassic Park, mainly because the environment itself was very, very strong visually. So it wasn't just neutral. It wasn't dinosaurs in a neutral environment, but they were emanating from something that already had a strength. Perfect type of environment where you'd want to see a dinosaur.
Having chosen this dramatic location, Spielberg and his crew began the work of turning Kauai into Jurassic Park.
work on is we're going to have the... We'll be able to see the lights in the shop.
Yeah.
Great. Hey, guys.
Stephen specifically made a point that Jurassic was to be as real-looking as possible in order to get the audience to believe everything we were going to take them through.
When you're putting dinosaurs back on the Earth in 1993, you have to understand that the audience has to believe in order to take the journey. And I think an audience will buy into, you know, the most far-fetched fantasies if it's done seriously and with a lot of credibility. So I didn't cast movie icon stars to play the different characters. I try to cast really, really good actors. I thought Laura Dern was the perfect Ellie Sattler because she's such an honest actor. Sam Neill's an honest actor. Jeff Goldblum is an incredibly naturalistic actor. It seems like he's making up the dialogue as he speaks.
See, here I'm now by myself talking to myself. That's chaos theory.
Because the acting was so realistic. There's enough character in the movie to make you root for the people, not just for the dinosaurs, and I think that made all the difference in the world.
As shooting began, the filmmakers were anxious to see how their dinosaurs would perform. First on the schedule was Stan Winston's full-size Triceratops.
It was important that we either got bloodied on our first day of shooting or we succeeded. Thank goodness for Stan Winston and his team, the Triceratops worked wonderfully. Didn't it look so pathetic lying there?
These are dilated. Take a look. It's okay.
I'll be damned. It was a nice weaning in for us into the process because we had some really hellaciously difficult stuff coming up, and it was a good sort of springboard for us, for everyone to see. A dinosaur that was totally believable, did what it was supposed to do, so that our first footage was so dramatic, and we got by it, and now we're on to the tough stuff.
The next sequence would star the enormous brachiosaur, which would be missing until post-production. Before Jurassic's computer animation breakthroughs, this type of effects shooting went slowly, requiring cumbersome, specialized cameras.
We've managed to pretty much get rid of that for the show. We didn't have to set up a special camera to do it with that might take an hour or two, which meant that we could shoot our backgrounds extremely quickly. You can come up with new ideas also, and one of the things that was good on the Brachio sequences is Stephen came up with 2 or 3 new shots while we were shooting it, just on the spot. The shot of Sam and Laura walking up on a very low angle and looking up the neck of the Brachiosaurus where you see its head way up in the treetop up there, looking almost straight up in the air at him, was one of the shots that really added to the sequence. Previously, you never would have gotten it.
Filming quickly moved on to the raptor pen, where the vicious carnivores would not be seen, but only heard. During these shots, Spielberg provided his own brand of motivation for the actors as they imagined the dinosaurs below.
Oh, God.
By mid-September, shooting on Kauai was complete, and the production returned to California. After 2 days' work in the Mojave Desert, the crew moved indoors to film the rest of the movie on sound stages. Sets included the genetics lab, the inside of the visitor's center, and largest of all, a complete recreation of the main road and T-Rex paddock from Kauai. Shooting the T-Rex attack on a soundstage gave the filmmakers more control for this logistically complex sequence, which would require both live action and computer-generated dinosaurs to interact heavily with the actors and the set.
No matter what creature we had, whether it was a CG creature, a real creature, whatever we tried to do, we had to figure out how to make it interact with real life. So I went about taking anything in the story that was going to be touched by a creature, figuring out how to control it, how to make it crush itself, bend a fence without being there. Everything had to basically be controlled from off-screen, on cue. Originally, everyone had this scare that the computer technology would put everyone out of work. They're going to sit, directors will sit at a keyboard and punch one button that says D for dinosaur and another button that says C for creature. And in Jurassic, we learned that it created a lot of work for us. You want to know what the most difficult gag in the entire film was? Yeah. The vibrating glass of water. This is a great story. Stephen is in his car, and he had Earth, Wind, and Fire cranked up in the car. And his rear view mirror was vibrating.
I was on my way to do storyboards for Jurassic Park, and I never forgot what I looked like vibrating every time the bass rhythm went off. I thought in the middle of storyboarding, hey, wouldn't it be cool if when the T-Rex began to approach, the low-end vibration of all that tonnage hitting the ground was causing these little concentric circles.
And it was really hard to do. We tried everything. And he kept saying, how's a glass of water? He goes, now we're going to get those vibrating rings that come out just perfect, right? Oh yeah, we're working on it, Stephen. It's great. You're going to love it. And we had no idea. I'm asking everybody. I called sound engineers. I called, physics, wave tank, generators. When we're trying to get these perfect rings that he wants out in this water. And the night before the shot, I went home, and I'm at home, and I'm still playing around, and I took a guitar that I had at home and set a glass of water on the guitar and plucked the string, and it vibrated and did it. So the next morning we came in and I brought guitar strings, and we fed a guitar string through the car down to the ground, and I had a guy land to the car and pluck the guitar string, and that's how that shot is done.
I had no idea that it was going to cause Mike Lantieri so many sleepless nights.
As promised, the rings of water heralded the arrival of Jurassic's fierce Tyrannosaurus Rex.
The shooting of the T-Rex main road sequence was the most amazing shoot of my entire career. Well ahead of time in pre-production, we talked about and knew about this particular sequence and how difficult this sequence was going to be. Why is it going to be so difficult? It was in the middle of rain. It was a heavy, rainy set. We talked strongly with Stephen, letting him know that we're dealing with something that was electronic, robotic, something things could go wrong with. We had to keep the rain off of the T-Rex.
Let's take it out and do it again.
This T-Rex was in a torrential downpour every second of footage that he was on film.
Can we please stop this? I want to dry him down. One more time, all right.
Things that we had designed to prevent the T-Rex from wugging or jiggling is based on fine-tuning of this machine based on his weight. And as he would get rained on, his skin would soak up water and his weight would change, and in the middle of the day he would start having the shakes and we'd have to dry him down.
Once again.
We were constantly fighting this element of rain, but it was wonderful to see this 9,000-pound wonder, 40 feet long, getting in there and acting.
The success of the T-Rex sequence inspired Spielberg to change his plans for the climax of the film only weeks before the end of shooting.
When I saw the maiden road attack, I said, I think our star in this movie is the T-Rex. The audience will hate me if the T-Rex doesn't come back and make one more heroic appearance. So I just concocted the idea there'd be a big raptor T-Rex fight.
The original ending for the film was not what's in the film right now. It was smaller scale with a couple of raptors in the rotunda, and Grant, I think, killed them, and when the raptors got stuck in their skeleton and was killed when it crashed to the ground.
Unlike the previous T-Rex scene, which intercut robotic creatures with CGI elements, Spielberg's new ending would rely exclusively on computer-generated dinosaurs, requiring animation far more complex than anything previously attempted.
That's something that we couldn't have done, or even known we could have done, 2 months earlier. Stephen had been seeing the work we've been doing, and he got to thinking, I guess, that we needed a bigger ending for the film, which was great. It's the right idea, and here was the technology to do it.
The raptor is on this side of his head. To get him around this way, you can see that him grab like the raptor's tail, and then he pulls the raptor and he steps back.
We just got on the set and blocked out the actions, and oh God, how are we ever going to maintain this kind of continuity? But God, if we can, it's really going to be neat.
You set the camera up in the room, and you shot as if there was a full-size animal in the room with the actors. ILM would often take intricate measurements. They put up these what I call the barber poles, even do a lighting reference, so the computer guys could see how the light was affecting the T-Rex. We were all a little scared to be too experimental at the beginning of the learning curve, but after a while we were shooting this thing like we had been doing CGI movies for 10 years.
The completion of this climatic scene in the visitor center marked the end of shooting, 12 days ahead of schedule.
Cut! Ready!
The picture, however, was far from complete. Finishing it would make film history. Before any of the computer-generated dinosaurs could be added, Spielberg and editor Michael Kahn had to put the film together.
I spent a number of weeks with Mike every single day just, cutting the film down, trimming, making changes.
We would show people reacting to something, and I just have to cut the scene as if there were dinosaurs there. Stephen would look at the scene with me, and then we'd say, gee, it's great now. If ILM can do their part, the scene looks great without the dinosaurs. Imagine what it's going to look like with the dinosaurs.
And when I was happy with the picture, I locked the print. I literally said, this is a lock, this is the movie. No more changes were done to it, and I turned it over to the post-production group.
The beginning of 1993 saw Jurassic Park enter its most crucial stage. It was time to add over 50 CGI shots. This unprecedented task called for the most powerful, state-of-the-art computers available.
I'm right now in one of our 3 computer rooms that we have here at ILM. And what we have here are thousands and millions of cycles of computing power going by every single second. They are noisy, they're active, they're hot, and it's up to the people to be able to harness all this energy and all these computing cycles and be able to create images of dinosaurs on the screen.
Although the early tests had proven the computer's ability to create dinosaurs, Spielberg now needed more. Jurassic's dinosaurs had to deliver a performance. For the animators, this meant an entirely new level of research and preparation.
We wanted to get our heads into that of a dinosaur's. We want to learn to think like a dinosaur because, in a sense, our performances are being put into the digital character, the dinosaurs, onto the screen. So you have to understand its motivations, just like being an actor. When you enter the room, you have to know what you look at first and why, how you hold your body, how you're going to move.
To help the animators better understand their dinosaurs, Phil Tippett had them step away from their computers.
One of my big things is to try and get the animators to pantomime with their bodies. So we had instituted these mime classes.
Taking those classes helped us be aware of our body and helped us be aware of what we were doing and how we were moving and how our foot moves when we take a step. And those are the things that the animator has to think about because those are the things they have to duplicate to get reality.
So another interesting thing that we did is because we wanted to make sure that we really had our heads in the right place, that we were dinosaurs, we used to go outdoors and run around pretending we were gallimimuses or T-Rexes, hunting each other and shoot film. Also to give us an idea of how an animal in motion would look, at least if we were that animal.
We were running around with our hands like this, thinking we were gallimimuses, and we watched ourselves and how we move. Because the galleys were bipedal, and humans are bipedal, there's a certain amount that you can get from that, watching to see how you shift your weight and things like that.
As research continued at ILM, Phil Tippett's Go Motion animators searched for a way to apply their traditional skills to modern computers.
We are hands-on guys. We're used to actually walking up to the puppet, making each of these moves by hand. I'm not used to sitting down at a keyboard and having to hit buttons. It's kind of like animating with boxing gloves on.
To bridge this gap between computer animation and movable miniatures, Tippett's shop came up with a unique solution.
We proposed the development of this particular piece of hardware, which we nicknamed the dinosaur input device. We take a puppet that's very similar to what they're used to animating and electronically encode it so that they can move this around and have that be applied to a computer.
The DID translated actual movement into computer instructions. It eliminated the keyboard while yielding the same CGI results. To ensure that all these results were believable, both sets of animators looked to nature for guidance.
Jurassic Park was one of the first films where we could have dinosaurs move as animals. So we poured over animal footage so that we could inject these with believable movements and stay away from third-hand fantasy interpretations, but really go to the source, and that was nature.
assure a consistent look between the CGI and mechanical dinosaurs, Stan Winston's miniatures, known as maquettes, were sent to the computer artist.
And those maquettes were literally put into the computer. So the computer had a design that would configure and wouldn't vary. I didn't want people to say, oh, that's a CGI shot. I wanted to bridge every single technology so the film would simply be, that's a dinosaur, as Grant does when he looks back and he says,
It's a dinosaur.
The enormous brachiosaur was the first CGI dinosaur brought to life on screen.
My job was to look at the CGI shots they were turning out, and I would look at the shots and I would critique them and I would make changes to them all the time. I was a real critic about getting the animals to blend in seamlessly to the actual scenes.
Next up was the Gallimimus herd, which required the animation of more than 25 individual dinosaurs.
We had to figure out a technique that would allow us to get a herd of them done in the same amount of time it would take to get one shot done with a singular creature. So the idea was that we'd create a single cycle of a single running animal and then use that cycle over and over again for multiple animals.
Simple geometric shapes were then used to choreograph the herd.
These are stand-in shapes, basically, that represent all the galleys. And by moving these hood ornaments around, we can get a feeling for how the herd would move through the environment. And then, one at a time, we went in and substituted a run cycle for each of those hood ornaments. Then we go in and we take each individual cycle and we edit it and change each of the individual galleys so that they move slightly differently, interacting with their environment.
They're flocking this way.
To convey the energy of the stampeding herd, Spielberg needed complete freedom to move his camera, something traditional technologies would have denied.
I kept saying, I want to move the camera. Don't tell me that every time a CGI dinosaur comes plodding through the scene, I got to lock down my camera. I want to dolly and pan and be normal. I even want to handhold. That was the ultimate challenge. Can you handhold and still put the element into the scene? And Dennis was able to do that. He raced along with Grant and Lex and Timmy running, looking at nothing, and that was bouncing all around the place with a bunch of references that Dennis put into the ground, little Day-Glo golf balls.
The resulting grid was used as a frame-by-frame reference so the computer could chart and match the movement of the camera.
And Dennis was able to take out the golf balls, put into the galleys, inside a handheld shot.
Having succeeded with the Gallimimus herd, ILM moved on to the T-Rex, which proved to be the most difficult to animate.
My big responsibility with the whole thing was to get the Rex to run in all the shots. It took me a long time to do. There's no reference for a 7-ton bipedal animal that can move 30 miles an hour.
We met with 3 paleontologists, and they didn't even agree amongst themselves. They're trying to extrapolate from things like footprints and bones and fossil evidence and determine how an animal might move. But when you work from a purely visual standpoint, you sort of have a whole nother way of attacking that problem.
It took me like 2 months to try and figure out how to make them run correctly. So I do things like look at them running backwards all the time. Right? You see a lot of mistakes of a creature running backwards.
Then we showed them our first film that we liked. And when it was all done, they looked at us and said, you know, that looked pretty dang good, and maybe you guys are right.
Computer technology also made it possible to add important details to affect shots. The splashing water made by the Tyrannosaur's footstep is one such detail. The water was filmed as a separate element. The computer was then able to place the splashing precisely around the dinosaur's foot. Jurassic's animators were creating dinosaurs that looked absolutely real, yet they would not be fully brought to life until one crucial element was added. Sound.
The truth is that no one knows what they sound like, and the paleontologists, they have no idea because vocal cords and all that wouldn't survive. The directions we got were the same that the visual effects people got, which is to make it like an animal.
I just really trusted Gary and just said, go create dinosaur sounds that don't sound like Godzilla or Rodan, and make them sound real, but also make them sound big and deep. And Gary just went off and created these sounds that were wonderful.
The first thing we did was record a lot of raw material from living animals and then piece them together in interesting ways.
Jerry really wanted to start with a clean slate rather than taking sounds out of a library. He wanted to go out and have me collect sounds in every form so that every sound would be a new sound never heard before by any other audience. I went out with ideas of what sounds we needed to gather. I found myself just moving around all over the place looking for sounds. Oftentimes I get lucky and come across, strange circumstances that provided great audio events.
When we go out in the field and we record what ends up to be a lot of garbage, and then when we come across something we like, I sample it. We put it in the computer and then I can manipulate it here. So now it's on a keyboard, you can perform it. And then very quickly you can get a sense of what these raptors are doing.
The fierce scream of the raptors is actually a mix of two rather harmless marine animals.
The first sound was a dolphin we recorded underwater, and it made this high-pitched scream. It was really horrific. And then I would combine that with a walrus. The walrus had a deep resonant chest cavity roar. And between the two, it blended into a single scream that sounded like a scary animal who was also big. One of my favorite sequences is the T-Rex coming out of the woods and eating a gallimimus. The sound people can really appreciate the animation for the scene because we're looking for little cues to put sounds in. And there was a very sad moment in that scene where the galley is first attacked by the T-Rex but still alive. Then he looks up at the T-Rex in the sort of last-ditch effort to either beg for forgiveness or see what's hitting him, I don't know which. There's this real poignant moment, so we put the most poignant horse cry I could find, just in that little moment where he looks up and then gets clobbered. And of course the T-Rex shaking and killing the gallimimus is just my dog playing with a rope toy. There's a synergy that happens. If the visuals are working really well, then the sound works really well too. I mean, you can't have one without the other, I think. They create a whole that's stronger than the parts.
Having met success in creating dinosaurs, the animators were anxious to extend the boundaries of their techniques and tackle other production challenges. The first chance came during the T-Rex attack. This shot required the filmmakers to animate not just the dinosaur, but the vehicle as well.
What I have to do in this case is record all the physical data of the set, right? How high the camera is, the size of the lens. And I reconstruct that entire set of data in computer graphics. So in wireframe, I have the same reflection of what happened down in the set. This is all on the CG side of it. So when I composite the actual plate in, it looks like it's all one element.
The animators pushed the same technique even further during the Tyrannosaurus encounter with the lawyer.
One of the challenges for us was to make this T-Rex bite and grab and bring into the air this real guy. So what we did was we replaced him. It's a real live guy at the head of the shot when he's doing like this, and then when the T-Rex chomps him, we switched to our computer graphics guy. And it gave us the flexibility to make the T-Rex take the most appropriate action, take the action that a real T-Rex would when he would yank him into the air and shake him to like break all the bones in his body so he can kill him and eat him.
As the filmmakers ventured further into the CGI frontier, they realized they were only scratching the surface of the computer's potential.
As a result of this huge technological breakthrough, you can do anything that you want. It's opened everything up, but you're no longer constrained by materiality. You can do what you imagine, but it is a tool in its infancy.
So I think CGI will be just another tool to make filmmaking easier. But this technology in 10 years is going to be awesome, more than I can even imagine sitting here talking to you.
The awesome potential of CGI as a filmmaking tool became clear when it offered a solution to one of the film's most thrilling shots.
When the stunt girl did this shot, she ended up at one point looking up at the camera, and there was a point where you could actually recognize her face, and it didn't look like Ariana, the girl that played the girl. So what we did was actually replace the stunt girl's face with her face, so that it looks like her actually falling through the ceiling.
The final challenge for the post-production team was completing Spielberg's new ending, which would push the capabilities of computer animation with very limited.
We didn't know how close, literally, we could get on one of these computer-graphic dinosaurs, how big in the frame they could be before they would start falling apart and looking like a computer-generated trick of some sort. We've got a shot in there where you're 5 feet in front of the head of a Tyrannosaurus and it's full frame, and it doesn't look at all like it's computer. It looks like a totally real animal.
Jurassic Park was finally complete and ready for release on June 11th, 1993. After 65 million years, the world was about to see dinosaurs live again. The reaction was phenomenal. Audiences all over the world packed theaters in record numbers. We were thrilled, frightened, and awed. Even the filmmakers themselves could not help but be amazed at what their collective efforts had achieved.
It's a dinosaur.
When you finally see the finished sequence and the pain is all over and all the anxiety that you have is all over and you realize how it all blends together, it's a thrill.
It's what I, as a kid, always wanted to see. I think that's what's coming out. It's a big, neat adventure movie with some really neat-looking stuff in it.
They didn't match the expectations so much as they matched the hope. Oh, please, God, please let this all work together.
Even though I was closely involved with it for such a long period of time, I still watch the film and I go, how did we do this?
It was a wonderful collaboration between, effects and artistry and science and paleontology. Every single dinosaur exceeded my expectations. I think the success of Jurassic Park can be attributed simply to the fact that it's about these leviathans of ancient history. It was everything I wanted it to be, no less and a lot more.